Good morning. We still have people going through the breakfast line. We'll get started in 5 minutes. It is very exciting to see such a large group. We are excited. We think we have a wonderful program. But before I do that, welcome to the Commerce City's first annual Business Forecast Breakfast. I would like to acknowledge the elected officials here today for Commerce City. I see Mayor Pro Tem Renee Bullock. Please stand. Rick Teeter. And Jim Benson. Right now, I'd like to bring up to the stage Mayor Pro Tem to give opening remarks. Renee Bullock, please.
Good morning. Welcome to Commerce City. On behalf of the mayor, the council, the staff, I want to welcome everybody here this morning, and it's good to look out there and see such full tables. If you don't mind, at this time, would everybody stand and we do the Pledge of Allegiance, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Well, the only thing I have to do is welcome everybody here. Welcome. I was thinking about making remarks and telling you how happy we are to see you and everything, but that's obvious. We are extremely happy to see everyone here this morning. So my other job is to introduce your moderator this morning. And our moderator this morning is Mr. Mark Goldberg. So at this time, would you give a nice, healthy welcome to Mr. Mark Goldberg? Thank you.
Well, good morning, everyone. I'm reading that a recent book on about Thomas Jefferson and standing before the flag and that word of liberty that really resonates with me, and it really focuses on the liberty to be involved with business. And I welcome all of you. I know you're business leaders from Commerce City, and we're going to have a great program this morning. Things are somewhat daunting now. You turn on the news every night, read the Wall Street Journal, the Denver Post, trying to figure things out, where we are with our national debt, where durable goods are, retail purchases, what retailers are doing, and how retailing is changing day to day from brick and mortar retailing to internet retailing. Where we all fit in our various industries is somewhat confusing. And through all this, business owners and business leaders have to keep on track. You can't stop. So kind of making something solid of the mashed potatoes that's out there is somewhat confusing. This morning, it is our hope that the first annual Commerce City business forecast will bring some sensibilities and some good logic to these daunting questions for you as business leaders to move forward. Our guest speakers are a distinguished group this morning. Lisa Strunk is a research economist and development research with Development Research Partners. Among other things, Lisa is a professor of economics for the University of Colorado and Metro State. She is the past served as an economist and policy and financing for Governor Owens' administration, and she has been a senior research analyst for the Colorado Health Institute and worked for the Child Health Care Plan. We have a banker with us this morning. We always need one of those. Jimmy Kanak is with UMB Bank. He's an assistant vice president, and Jimmy's role with the bank is to assist small businesses. Philip Noble is an administrator with to my far right, the Adams County Workforce and Business Center, and Philip is responsible for really bringing businesses and advising businesses within the Adams County area and bringing some focus on that and helping you as business leaders do that, and has been doing it for a long time. His past experience, he served as a senior organizational development consultant for Storage Tech and has been the past director for workforce development in other areas. So what we're going to cover this morning is where we are with core industries and how they affect Commerce City, DIA technology, retail, hospitality and leisure, business professional services, logistics and transportation, and advanced manufacturing. And I think each one of our panelists will touch on those and other key features. So we'll start with Lisa. And I guess, Lisa, what are some of the impediments to the economic growth in the metro area, and what do you see any of these and how they might be resolved in 2013? Are you plugged in and ready to go?
Yeah, is it working? Yeah, okay. Yeah, I will touch on that in my presentation, so I can come up there.
Head right on.
Okay. All right, so good morning. Thank you for inviting me here this morning, and I want to give you an idea about where we are with our economy in the region. Our forecast theme this year is Traverse. So a couple years ago, my husband and I decided that we would hike a 14er, and if we enjoyed that, we would hike another one. So I am happy to tell you that we have now hiked 20 14ers, and we're on a quest to probably do all of them in Colorado. The 14er that you see behind me, this is Long's Peak. It is the highest 14er in Rocky Mountain National Park. It is also the longest in terms of total distance, between 14 and 15 miles round trip. It's also a difficult hike because the majority is above tree line, so you're pretty exposed for a long period of time. So when we think about the economy these days, we see that there are a lot of similarities between climbing any type of mountain or climbing a 14er and what we see going on in the economy. There are many ups and downs with the economy, and sometimes you can see your goal or your summit very clearly. Other times it might be clouded over or more difficult to see. If you've ever done any type of mountain climbing, you know that sometimes going down can be just as difficult as coming up. And that's what we see with the economy. We're feeling a lot better these days about what we see going on in the economic data, which I'll share with you this morning. What I found on Long's Peak is the Traverse, which is along that whole backside of the mountain where that pink line is showing. That can be really difficult, and sometimes it can feel like you're going on and on forever without making a whole lot of progress, and that's sort of what we see with the economy. And that can be challenging, just like it is challenging for many of our businesses. So one of those things that you can use that whole Traverse for is making those plans for this next uphill climb as a business. And we'll talk about the business side and then the consumer side of our economy right now. So our business community, businesses really have to be thinking about all the opportunities that exist out there right now. We have a very low rate of inflation in terms of taking advantage of that. We also have a labor surplus. There are still about 121,000 people out there in Metro Denver trying to find a job. So if you're a business, this is a good time to be looking for workers. There's also some great real estate opportunity in terms of industrial, office, and retail, and especially on the residential side. So we'll touch on that a little bit later. Also, we have low interest rates. So for businesses, this is a great opportunity to really be thinking about being in that whole growth mode right now. So we have a lot of bargains out there to be had from the business perspective. What we do know, however, is that businesses are still a little timid about operating. When we take a look at the percentage of companies that are adding workers in the region, we've seen that prior to the recession, there was a big burst in hiring. About 40% of our employers said that they would be adding workers. As you can see, we saw this slip really dramatically during the most recent recession, but I'm happy to report that for the first time in a number of quarters, that about 20% of our companies said they're going to be adding workers in the whole first quarter of 2013. So we're starting to see that number come up a little bit, so that is good news. But because businesses have been slow to add workers, this unemployment rate is still sticking at some relatively high and uncomfortable levels. In Metro Denver, we see these unemployment rates, they're generally lower than the U.S. level, but we're starting to see our economy converge a little bit more with the U.S. It used to be that we had a slightly larger differential between the Metro Denver economy and the U.S., but it's actually starting to look a little bit more like the U.S. economy. As I mentioned, this unemployment rate, if we're looking at about 7.5% to 8%, that means that we still have 121,000 people looking for a job. We do expect that number to trend down in 2013, but at a relatively slow pace. Note, though, that we are down from the 2010 peak where we had 136,000 people looking for a job. So we're starting to whittle away at that number, but at a relatively slow pace. So in terms of employment growth rates, if companies are not hiring that rapidly, then neither are we growing those jobs that rapidly. We're starting to see a little uptick in this number, so that is good news. And we're going to be hitting full economic recovery in terms of adding jobs in 2013. And what I mean by that is during the last recession, Metro Denver lost about 68,000 jobs. We have now added all those jobs back, and we are now hiring again, so we are making progress there. The U.S. is still lagging behind. Between 2008 and 2010, the U.S. economy lost about 7.7 million jobs. We've added back about 4.6 million, so that means we still have 3 million people out there looking for a job. So the U.S. level is moving at a relatively slow pace. So if indeed we are in this whole growth phase, there we go. What types of industries do we see growing and expanding in Metro Denver? So this slide takes a look at our industry base across Metro Denver according to federal industry codes. There are 11 super sectors that we watch and look to see how diverse our economy is in the region and how they're growing over time. Notice in 2012 we had 3 super sectors that shed jobs, and those 3 are pretty interesting. I'm just going to touch on those. The first one is the government sector, and that represents all levels of government, federal, state, and local. And we know that during the recession, tax receipts were down for many of our local and state governments, and so that was hit fairly hard. The second industry there that's shedding jobs is the information sector. This is a broad category that includes telecommunications, and that has gone through quite a transformation in our marketplace and also across the U.S. The third one that we see shedding jobs is transportation, warehousing, and utilities. This is a broad category mainly driven by utilities and really driven by efficiency. But in 2013, we expect all the industries to add jobs except for information, which continues to be a challenge for that particular industry. The other way that we like to talk about our industry base in Metro Denver is through what we call industry clusters. These are combinations of companies that produce a similar type of good or share a similar type of, require a similar type of labor. There are 8 industry clusters that form the key economic base here in the Metro Denver region. We break out a few of these larger clusters into what we call subclusters. So if we do that, there are a total of 12 clusters and subclusters. I should also note that just because you do not see a cluster here does not mean it is not important. Many of the industries across Commerce City are part of these clusters in some form or another. These are just across the entire 9-county Metro Denver Northern Colorado region. In 2011, we saw 7 of these clusters and subclusters grew, but I'm happy to report that in 2012, all of them grew except for broadcasting and telecommunications, which continues to be challenged. Also during the recessionary period, many of these clusters continue to expand. Notably, healthcare and wellness has grown every year since 2003. That is our largest cluster in Metro Denver. I encourage you to visit www.metrodenver.org for more information. There you can find more extensive narrative on each of these clusters and also company-specific and employment-specific information. So this expansion and employment growth then is tending to bode well for our commercial real estate markets. Indeed, our office vacancy rate is coming down a bit, so that is good news. And a lot of that is because employment growth has been slow to pick up, so we haven't seen this really coming down that quickly. And also, we haven't built that much in Metro Denver. We've had limited new construction. The construction that we are seeing right now is really around the Denver Union Station, and that's driving a lot of the office market development right now. In 2012, we completed just under 1 million square feet of new office space throughout Metro Denver. If you think back to the late 1990s and early 2000s, we were completing 7 million square feet a year. So we're really down significantly if you look at that from a historical perspective. But we really haven't had the job growth to really fill up many of these vacant buildings, so it makes sense from our perspective. The industrial and retail markets, we also see similar trends there as well. So if we turn to our consumers then, so if you're wondering if I made it to the top of Long's Peak, I did. That is my husband and I at the top. And we are signaling that that is 14 or number 19. And we started having to use hand signals to keep track of what number we were on. So if we go back to our whole 14er analogy, when consumers are out there spending, they're really feeling good about the economy, and this influences the direction the economy is going to go. The same is true for a 14er. We know that if the weather is bad, you're most likely going to turn around and probably not going to summit. But if the weather is good that day, you're probably going to have a good day and you're going to summit. We had good weather, and so we were able to summit that day. But it did take us just as long to come down as it did to go up. So on the consumer side, this is you and I out there spending money. The way that we spend money in the economy represents about 70% of economic activity out there. So if we're feeling shy or timid at all about the economy, that's going to slow the rate of growth overall. So if we take a look here at our consumer base, we are still nervous about spending out there. When we take a look at our consumer confidence levels, we look at the U.S. level compared to the metro or compared to the mountain region, which is our region. Our confidence has improved in recent months, but if you take a look at that from historical levels, we're still at fairly low levels. And no wonder with what is going on at the national level and also the international economy as well. So there's still a lot of consumers that are nervous out there. But the general trend in 2012 had been for increasing consumer confidence, and we hope this continues to improve in 2013. So we are feeling more confident, mainly because our incomes are starting to go up a little bit. But again, the issues of 2012 is that even though a lot of the economic indicators pointed to full steam ahead, one of the reasons people are still feeling hesitant is because their incomes are not growing as quickly as they would like. When we look at per capita personal income, you'll note in 2011 that we were still below the pre-recession level there in 2008. 2012 is when we're probably going to reach a point where we're recovering these per capita personal incomes. Income in Colorado continues to grow at a faster pace than the nation. Of course, a large component of this is wage growth. And until we really start to see those unemployment rates coming down, we're not going to see a whole lot of growth in our wages just yet. So when we combine all this, we can take a look then at how this impacts consumer spending. So if you look at that, 2012 is a really strong year for consumer spending. We just hit a little over 5%. After the recession, we saw a whole pent-up demand of our consumers. Many of our consumers went out and bought large ticket items such as automobiles and appliances. So 2012 is a good year. We expect, though, that in 2013, people don't necessarily need to make those big purchases every year. So we're going to have a slight pullback in terms of consumer activity, but growth nonetheless. One of the other aspects of consumer activity is what is going on in the residential real estate market. So this was really a surprise. When we were forecasting this last year, we didn't expect it to come in as strong as it did. In 2012, we saw a 17.5% increase in existing home sales activity. In 2013, we expect that we're going to hit a little over 48,000 home sales once again. So this is a really nice equilibrium type of level for the size of our market in Metro Denver. Notice that in the mid-2000s, that is when we had a lot of those boutique mortgage products that spurred a lot of housing activity. But I don't think we're going to return to those levels. I think that the activity that we're seeing right now is definitely more sustainable. And as home prices continue to rise and we have the stronger demand, or we have stronger demand in the housing market, we're going to see this in terms of our home prices. In Metro Denver, we have performed better than other markets in the nation. We saw about a 7% increase in our median home price in 2012, and that is compared to 4% at the national level. So our home prices are increasing, but it's pushing us into a little uncomfortable level right now. Metro Denver is now the 18th most expensive housing market compared to other parts of the country. So you have to go to the East Coast or the West Coast to find prices that are at the Metro Denver level or higher. Our home prices have been trending upward, but there are some pressures that are still playing on home prices that we are not too happy about, and one of them is foreclosure activity. This has come way down to where we were in the late 2000 decade, but we're still at relatively high levels. So we still have some work to do here in terms of foreclosures in our market. So that's putting some downward pressure in terms of prices, but what is helping to push prices up is that we have very limited supply and we haven't really built that much. In 2012, we built nearly 9,000 housing units, but keep in mind that our 30-year average here is 17,000. So we're still building way below these historic norms. However, we think this is a proper response to the market conditions that we're seeing right now. In 2013, we expect to hit that 10,000 mark. Notice the red bar is where we're seeing a lot of the growth. This is the multifamily market, or what we call the apartment market. That's accounted for a large percentage of the overall increase, about 90%. We've seen vacancy rates trending down for apartments, and that's triggering some of the development. A lot of the development that we are seeing is around many of the RTD rail lines that are going in right now. So we have a lot of the attached single-family developments that are occurring and apartment activity. Okay, so the traverse, so this gradual economic growth. Sometimes it feels like you are not getting very far, but you are making progress, truly. Indeed, 2012 by all economic indicators was a great year, and we expect the same for 2013. However, there are some challenges in terms of impediments to our whole of economic growth. Most of these challenges do remain at the global level. There's a lot of global economic unease. We still have high unemployment rates. We know that our businesses, you're still seeking clarity on healthcare and tax issues. And until you get some of that, that is not going to go away. And what's happening with government spending and how that's going to influence many of our industry clusters in the region, particularly with the Department of Defense and how that will influence our aerospace economy. But there's also some great opportunities. As I've mentioned, we have low interest rates, low inflation, so great opportunities for businesses right now to start rebuilding and re-strategizing. We also have strong consumer spending, so even though we are nervous, we're still out there spending some money. We have a very active home sales market, low inventory. We only have about 77 homes right now that are on the market, so that's very, very low inventory. And we have an improving commercial real estate market as well. So with that, I will wrap up my little section. It's a lot of data for the morning. I apologize, but hopefully you've all had coffee and you're all wide awake now.
Well, Lisa, thank you very much. Hope you get your 35 peaks in next year and get them all done.
Hope so.
I like the peaks on your charts too. Those are trending properly,
Yes.
going up as well.
Yes.
So, Jimmy, interest rates are down. That's great. Access to the capital, though, is still a pretty big question mark for small businesses, and I'm hoping that you maybe touch on that, as well as a lot of businesses and individuals over the last few years through the recession took some dents, and how those dents might affect their ability to access capital into the future as the economy starts to improve, I think would be of interest to our audience.
Sure, absolutely. Oh, I didn't know my picture was going to be up there like that. That's great. That's my phone going like this to get my LinkedIn picture on here. Let's see. All right. So thank you very much. I just give you a brief background. I've had 10 years in banking. Colorado native, grew up in Niwot, went to CSU. Grew up in an entrepreneurial family, so I kind of understand what it's like to talk business all the time in front of the kitchen table, eat, sleep, and drink your business. So I wasn't brave enough to, like a lot of you folks out there, to do it, so I get to help support it, and it's a passion of mine because I saw my parents go through it. UMB Bank's a regional size bank. Give you an idea, we're, I think, just south of about $12 billion in assets compared to about a $400 billion. That's a rough estimate of maybe a Bank of America type bank. I say that because I want to give you a perspective on today of an idea of what not all banks are the same. You're not going to get the same response from banks. And not all bankers are the same. You're not going to get the same response from all bankers either. So what I'd like to do a little bit today is to dispel that myth that banks aren't lending. It's also gives some ideas on what banks would expect from business owners, and more importantly, what business owners should expect from a banking relationship. So one of the first things to help address that question that you asked has to do with how prepared you might be before you look at accessing capital. Throughout the last 5 years, we've seen that low water mark in the economy move further and further away, luckily. Some of us, some business owners are, it's only maybe a year out, some it's maybe 4 or 5 years out. We saw some of those indicators maybe in 2006 and 2007 even, that there was a low water mark for a lot of business owners. Luckily, we're getting further away from that at this point, and I think the optimism that's out there can be echoed in a lot of my customers and the folks that I'm working with. There's that overused phrase of cautiously optimistic, but I think that's kind of, it is very true. Last year we saw, from a lending perspective, some of the most robust lending that we've done in the last 5 years. Throughout the recession, there were a lot of banks lending. There were a lot of banks who weren't, because they were focused inwardly, trying to work out their own balance sheets, and so they weren't there. That's absolutely true that there were banks that were not able to add any value to their customers' experience when it came to accessing capital, anything like that. So when you're in this environment, as you're looking through trying to find access to capital, trying to take that next step, if you are in that area where you're optimistic about wanting to move forward, add some capital expenses this year, things like that, coming prepared, not thinking of things transactionally. I think a lot of business owners and a lot of banks treat lending transactionally rather than from a relationship perspective. I listed up here what a lot of banks look for, and you've probably heard 5 C's of credit, and that's generally, this might give you an idea of what the banks want to see. That credit piece, a lot of folks are in a position where maybe their credit isn't as favorable as it was pre-recession because of a lot of obvious factors. That's just one piece of it. The other 4 are just as important, and a lot of times when there is a blemish on credit, banks are able to look past that if the other areas are strong. So as the banks look at credit, collateral, character's a big one, and it can't be understated. I think character meaning how involved are you in the community? How prepared are you when you are talking to your lender, whether it's a bank or whether it's an alternative lender, which we'll get into in a minute here. And really, it's not something that you can prepare for. It's something that you have or you don't have. I think everybody might agree to that. Cash flow is one that is also an important one, of course, although, again, if that's, as everyone's seen in the last few years, has had a dip or there's a low water mark there, having those projections ahead of time, understanding where your business is going to be in the next 2 to 3 years is just as important as understanding where it's been the last couple of years. And then the conditions, that's always going to impact everything. I think you could probably substitute conditions again for capital. How much money are you able to keep in your company? A lot of business owners, it's their model to be able to take those distributions at the end of the year. What a number of lenders like to see is that you're going to continue to keep some of that equity inside in the company so that you'll have that available, you'll have that cushion if you're able to. And then I skipped over it and I shouldn't have, but collateral, that's always going to be one. I think one of the perceptions that's out there as to why banks aren't lending today is that a number of banks got in trouble pre-recession because of loose lending standards. Part of that had to do with unsecured type lending. You're not going to find a lot of unsecured lending anymore. Credit cards is probably the primary product that you might see that's unsecured. Banks would like to see some type of tangible collateral and or accounts receivable as a collateral base for loans that they're going to do. And so I think that's a misconception. Pre-recession, some of those loose lending habits that some banks got into is why we got into trouble. And so a lot of banks are now having to rearrange that lending strategy so that they're a little more stringent on how they did lend. They still have the money to lend. They're just slightly different guidelines than they did. Some banks have always followed those guidelines, and those are the healthy ones. So that kind of gives you an idea of what you might prepare for as you're talking to your banker, or at least what your banker is looking for. So thinking transactionally versus a partnership, that's I kind of hinted at that a minute ago. Really what you should expect from your bank is that they don't treat you transactionally, that they're going to look long term. They're going to help you understand what tools and resources you have available to you and think strategically with you rather than just listen to what you're asking for as far as, let's say, a specific loan product and following that and being more of an order taker. What you should expect from your bank and from your banker is that they are going to, if you want them to be a partner as much as you want them to be, they will. One of my colleagues had kind of phrased this as a 5-star team. These are a lot of business owners wear so many hats. You know, you look up at that list of accountant, attorney, and insurance agent, and those are things that a lot of you probably all wear the same hat. You're doing marketing, you're doing operations. Having a council around you and finding good resources in these categories is something that, whether you're just starting out in business or whether you've been in business for 30 years, I think that it's a really important thing to have those people and know and trust those people. A lot of times what banks tend to see is a very transactional type of approach, and that's actually what a lot of banks do as well. Is it's strictly transactional. So look for a lender, look for a bank that's going to have a different approach and want to be a partner with you. Talking about different banks and what you might expect from those. So I mentioned $400 billion in assets for some of the larger banks and more. Medium-sized and small banks. You're going to have a different experience with each one of those. It tends to be, when we were just talking about transactional versus relationship, you might look at larger banks tend to be transactional, and I apologize to any bankers in the room that might be working for a large bank, because that's not true with all bankers. Some bankers are very relationship oriented. But generally speaking, you might have different divisions within a large bank that might do equipment lending, and so you'll have a person that will help you with equipment lending. You might have, if you're in a category where you're starting your business in a new practice division, if you grow your business and you go from small to large, you might have 2 different bankers that are going to help you with that. Regional size banks, UMB being a regional size bank, I can speak to that more clearly, it's really, you get a lot of the resources of a larger bank and more of the feel of a smaller community size bank. You don't tend to have different divisions and different bankers for different objectives. So it's kind of a nice mix there. Smaller banks, the community banks. There are a number of community banks that, like a lot of businesses, that through this recession have come out stronger than they were, either through acquisition, basically through surviving like a lot of business owners did. And community banks are going to give you that relationship. They're going to know you when you walk in. They have local decision making, and they'll be able to understand you because they want to, because that's their model. They like to understand their business owners in a way that it's a relationship and they know you when you walk in the door. When you talk about other ways to access capital, I've listed a few up here that are community partners that you may be familiar with. These are non-banks, they're non-traditional type lending associations or organizations. Axion is one, Colorado Enterprise Fund, Rocky Mountain Microfinance Institute, just to name a few, and I put the limits up there, at least what they listed on their website, as far as what their lending guidelines are, what they can lend. Now, they're going to have the similar guidelines, not quite the same. There are definitely some differences. I suggest if you've gone the bank route and you're just not finding what you need there, that these are some great companies to have a connection with and to see. We in the banking industry it's a small, Denver and Commerce City and the surrounding metro area is a small enough community that your bank probably knows about these folks and can get you introduced to them. If not, you can reach out to them, and they're very personable. They're smaller organizations, so you're dealing with just a few people, and it's a good way to find sometimes bridge financing if you need something like that to help you in the short term. Also, community partners, can't understate that. OED, as you all know, various levels within, whether it's a city or county or state OED, are all really good resources for helping build business plans, find access to different resources. And SBDC, there's various local SBDC offices, which I'm sure there's some folks in the crowd here too. So that, I don't know if I addressed every single question there, but that kind of gives you an overview of what I wanted to address today. So.
Well, I was thinking that it would be good if my bankers would kind of skip over the collateral piece too when I'm sitting before them with my applications for real estate. So I was saying, well, maybe there is no collateral. That's. I'm wondering, Jimmy, if there are some of the plethora of advancing industries and cluster industries that Lisa was talking about earlier. Are there targets for banks right now as to what industries they would say preferably be assisting and advancing capital to?
That's a good question. Yeah, I think you'll find that each bank probably has its own standard, even kind of a general guideline of who they might aggressively pursue as far as prospective customers. A lot of that would be, manufacturing is always a good one, and I think part of the reason for that is that it's a segment that has steady growth. It tends to show steady growth or stability during recessionary periods even. There's professional services is always one, especially in the Denver market, that is one that probably a lot of banks would consider in that area. Medical, health, the health industry. I mean, those would probably be the three. Each bank has its own agenda, I guess, in certain ways when it comes to prospecting for new customers, and at the same time, each bank is going to have different guidelines when it comes to those segments as well, when it comes to lending. But those would be the three that I could think of.
Great. Okay. Thank you. Phil, I'm sure our audience is interested in how the Workforce and Business Center can assist Commerce City businesses gain a competitive edge, and what are some of the growth industries that you're seeing, and just kind of following up on Jimmy's discussion, what cluster industries are growing in Adams County and maybe Commerce City?
Yeah, I'll go a little bit into that. That's right now we see aerospace, manufacturing, and healthcare in particular, and aerospace offers a unique challenge for our organization in that a lot of the positions, if we do get the spaceport here, don't even have names yet. We went to a metro state to talk to them about what kind of jobs we can expect around here in this area. And they named things like satellite support controller. There's no classification in the data for us to even follow that. So we're actually creating new jobs, or will be creating new jobs that haven't existed in the past. A lot of things around unmanned flight. If you fly something from here to Tokyo, it'll make it in 90 minutes, which is kind of interesting. It'll probably take it 3 days to get through customs, but nevertheless, it'll get there in 90 minutes. Those are going to be unmanned flights initially at first, so we have to have a whole different skill level. And again, it's jobs that haven't traditionally existed before. So it's kind of very exciting. Healthcare will continue to grow, especially with Anschutz campus. And manufacturing, we're working very hard to attract it to this area. I think we're just ideally positioned with I-70. But I'll go into some. Oh God, that's a picture of me. We don't need that, especially after breakfast, right? Isn't the red button, does that move it forward, or does that just kill the whole thing? Right-hand side? Phew, boy, that's scary. Well, I hope you're ready for a dazzling PowerPoint display of virtuosity here. I worked on this just minutes and minutes so that I could entertain you and actually, show off some of my expertise. We're Workforce and Business Center. We're located in Brighton in the Government Center. We have an office in Aurora in a kind of a part-time place, thanks to our partnership with Karma City Economic Development at the Derby Center. So we have easy access for the citizens of Adams County and Commerce City. I really like the term workforce and business because they're basically joined at the hip. They're not really independent terms and independent concepts, or there's not a partition between them, that's for sure. They're very dependent upon one another. In one way, the business is the demand side and the workforce is the supply side. That's the way we look at it. I think in the past, we've had programs where we've tried to grow the supply and hope the businesses follow. That doesn't generally work. What works better is that we work with the businesses, find out what the demand is, and then find the supply. So in that aspect, from at least the Workforce Center, business is the leading indicator and the workforce is the lagging indicator. So when the need comes up with the business, we have to supply the talent to help them grow. And our goal is to shorten that space between the leading and the lagging to the point where we have partnerships with local businesses to the point where if you create a need or understand you have a need coming up, we can fill it as soon as possible. But get ready for this virtuosity here for PowerPoint. Okay, I'll give you a few minutes to write this down. But I'm going to talk about the workforce side first. And we basically, we don't work for the United Nations. We work with the UNs. We work with the underemployed and the unemployed. And we all know what the impact of the unemployed is on our economy, and it tracks very well with how the economy grows and shrinks. But the underemployed is probably one of those things that we don't talk about too much. It's grown steadily since 1976, which basically was the high point for the middle class. And in the 70s, we started seeing the first effects of automation. After that, in the 80s and 90s, we saw the effects of offshoring, and then we had some bubble economics activity going on with recessions from in the 90s and most recently. And what that has meant is a large portion of the workforce has become underemployed. As that number grows, the size of the middle class shrinks. So one of our goals is to really help the underemployed become fully employed once again. And how do we do that? Well, we offer training. We have grants for education, for certifications. We have classes in our facilities for computer skills. That's how I learned how to do this really snappy PowerPoint presentation. We have assessments. We can do coaching. We have on-the-job training opportunities. We have networking opportunities, and we have just a multitude of assessments from the very high technical skills down to the soft skills, which we're finding most employers want. They want somebody who'll show up on time, who can smile every once in a while and work with a group of people. So what is the cost of this to the UNs, the unemployed and the underemployed? It's actually zero. We're federally supported, and one of the nice things about people who come through our system, and you may want to tell your friends and neighbors and maybe your own children this, is that people who come through the Workforce Center typically make $7,000 more on an annual basis than if they had found work on their own. So we help them find work that matches their skills and abilities very, very well. Now, get ready for the next slide. This one will really wow you. Oops. There we are. It took me all night to think of this one. And I don't mean information technology. I mean, I'm going to cheat here and actually write out a word. We're talking intelligence and talent, and this is for the business side. We actually offer businesses a form of competitive advantage by offering talent, offering data, intelligence, and training. I'll talk about the talent first. We probably have the deepest talent pool, in the state. I'm sure we do. We actually have over 200,000 job seekers that we try to match with opportunities in business. We're also recently had started what we call a small business initiative. This thing always kind of wispy. It sounds like or is that just me? And I've never known it before. I don't know. Well, anyway, I digress. The Small Business Initiative, what we're trying to do is get more information from small businesses on what their needs are and how we can help them grow. And we can do that by, again, providing talent and also by providing them with information that might help them make some decisions. So we do a lot of this activity through job fairs. We can do them virtually. You can do them online. You don't even have to leave your office, or do them in the flesh. Our goal is to get qualified candidates to you, just not send 3,000 people to your door and hope you can make it through the resumes, but just find the qualified ones and get them to you. And if we can't find those people, I like to say that we look next for the people that are this far away from being qualified. And we have the resources and the partnerships to be able to train those people to fit those jobs. Next, I'll talk about the intelligence part of this. And, maybe I shouldn't talk about that. I commute from Wellington to Brighton every day, so that's not really intelligent. But we work closely with our partners in economic development, the chambers, Office of Economic Development and International Trade, and we provide information. And what we can provide for them as well as you is competitive wage analysis, location of available talent, where are they actually located in the metro area, are they close enough to your work, commuter patterns, can they get to your location, can customers get to your location, industry growth projections, which is very important, what does the future look like. We're pretty good at looking 2 years out, not much beyond that. Staffing patterns, if I hire X, what does that mean for the rest of the company, what else do I need to go with that. Also saturation rates, which we'll look at various occupations and tell you, is there a supply of that particular skill in the workforce in your area? As a matter of fact, we can actually zero that in within like a 25-mile radius of Brighton if we want to. So you might ask, what does all this cost you? Well, that's actually zero also. Again, we're federally supported. Next question you might ask is, how do we actually access this information as businesses? And the easiest way is to call our business services department, or visit our facilities, or just jump on our webpage. We're on the Adams County webpage, and you can negotiate that fairly simply to where we're located. Or as a business, you can sign up for our monthly newsletter. In the back there, as you're going through the security thing, we have a little basket. If you want to put your business card there, we'll put you on our newsletter distribution list. And what we hope to be able to do is provide on a monthly basis workforce intelligence, economic projections that may help you and your business, and we'll be refining this as we move forward. And also we have some other web resources, and there's another card in the back there that gives you the URL for not only our web page, but something we call Career Coach. And that allows businesses and individuals to compare wages for various jobs and what the projections are for the future. Matter of fact, you can compare different jobs together. So if your son wants is trying to decide between, pet groomer and neurosurgeon, you can show him that there's a big delta there, pay-wise. But anyway, getting back to the two terms, our bottom line here is that if we can help your business grow with information and talent, then we have more opportunity to grow the economy. That's exactly what we want to do, and decrease the number of uns out there. Excuse me. That's it. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Phil. I'd like to make this a little interactive, and then we'll get into some questions, because I think this is a real opportunity for you business leaders to interact with this panel. But how many of you are more on the optimistic side of our economy and your businesses? Let's have a hand for the optimists. And the folks who are a little kind of stuck in the middle or pessimistic, show your hands of where things are. That's great. So we have an optimistic view. What industries do we have here? How many manufacturing or core manufacturing industries do we have? Transportation. Healthcare. Okay. Information services, or financial services, or banking and that sort of thing. Great. I'd like to open this up to questions of the panel, and I'd like to ask you to do something before you make your remarks to the panel. If you could kind of just say a brief thing about where you're located and what your business is all about before you address the question. So I think this is a real opportunity to kind of give not only the people in the audiences to know a little bit about you and who you are, but give the panel some ideas to where you're coming from. So let's fire out some questions here.
Hi, I'm Stan Konis with the E470 Public Highway Authority, and I was just wondering what your view of interest rates in the near term is. It's because we have some financing coming up this year and just trying to make some decisions.
I think from the bank's perspective, that rates are going to continue to stay low for the next year to two. I think that there's been some fluctuation in the mortgage rates recently, and those tend to have a life of their own compared to the maybe commercial rates or standard lending bank rates. But I think it appears that as long that primary indicator of what the Fed's going to do with the prime rate, for example, it seems that every indication is that they're going to keep that low for the time being. I think there's a number of reasons why, but I think that 12 to 24 months seems to be realistic that rates will continue to stay in the category that they are. Yeah, almost below 4% easily on most anything. I mean that's kind of high as far as rates. So.
And from our perspective, we've seen the same thing. And our forecast is short term. I mean, it only goes out to about a year to 2 years. But we're seeing the same thing. And from what I've read and read about other economists' views, that we think interest rates are going to stay low for the next 1 to 2 years for sure. So.
Do any of you see? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'm Noelle Staub. I'm one of the owners with Terry of Colorado Carpet Center. Anyway, my question is more directed almost to the moderator, just from the description of what you're doing. But can you give us any kind of update on exactly the development that's occurring currently in Commerce City, and maybe what's expected over the next couple years, especially in regard to the dog track area and just in general around this area?
I can speak a little bit about the dog track for sure. I mean, I think what the city is going through is a process now to really define the future use of the dog track, and it's been a process that's been going on for the last several months, but we really are on what I believe is a sound concept. And that concept looks something like this. And it kind of resonates from what the panel was talking about this morning, and is key to Commerce City. And the thought is to have basically a technical training campus. And this campus would involve itself in technical training from a very basic standpoint, giving people basic skills, welding, manufacturing skills, machinist skills, airframe skills, whatever it is, and coupling that concept with the needs of major employers or small employers in Commerce City that would then tag into that training. For larger employers, it may be having their facility for training folks on the same campus. Coupling that with some incubator space for small business to get started that need to have access to trained individuals, all on the same campus. Perhaps some housing and some retail and other facilities like that. So we're working with that general idea and really dialing it down. There's been an economic study done, and we're taking next steps. But I think you will see something on the dog track, probably not this year, but sometime in the next couple of years, and it's a process, but we think it'll be a key magnet, not only for Commerce City, but a unique facility for the whole entire metropolitan area.
If I can just add some detail to that, the feasibility report, the results that came back from that study that we'll have the details on by the beginning of March, show the technical training center as a portion. It also shows the feasibility for anywhere from 300 to 400 multifamily housing units, about 100,000 square feet of retail and or restaurant space, another 90,000 square feet of potential office space on the property. So these are what the results show are feasible, as well as another 260 in terms of hotel space. So there are a lot of options available to us on how to pull that together, and at the end of the feasibility study, we will be going out for an RFQ to developers to help us actually build the site. So that'll be done around March, between March and May.
Good morning. My name's Jerry Feinstein, and I'm the new engineering dean over at DeVry University for Colorado. And I have a question to anybody on the panel. I work a lot with entrepreneurs, and they deal with angel investors that are not sometimes all that sophisticated in transitioning the entrepreneur to the next step. We're venture capital. They have those connections. What would you recommend anyone here for those kinds of people, like their next step after an angel investor? Anyone want to take that?
I think the sooner that any business owner can be prepared for that next stage, the better. And I think when you're able to build a solid business plan from the very beginning, really at whatever stage you're at, to know what you're going to be doing for the next 5 to 10 years is really key. I think some good resources for that are local SBDCs are always a great resource, I think, for that. There are a lot of resources there to help business owners create business plans. So I think when a business is in that stage where they have angel investors, conversations around what are the plans for those next 5 to 10 years are going to be very important. And local OED office also, I think, is a good resource. Bankers can kind of help prepare a customer for what would be expected in the next 5 to 10 years, or when they are in that stage when maybe commercial banking or traditional lending would be an option for that customer. So they can help prepare, okay, if this is your goal at 5 years, here's what you need to do for the next 3 to be prepared. But really a business plan is always something that nobody really likes to prepare, but it's always such an important document, I think, and it should be a living, breathing thing that evolves over time. And I think those two offices that I mentioned, SBDC specifically, is a great resource for that. There's also I've come across a lot of former CEOs in the community that are now consultants that are there to offer their expertise to businesses at various stages. A number of community partners that attend these types of events should probably have access to a number of those types of professionals that can help from a financial standpoint of forecasting, of creating a budget for those goals. And really, there are a lot of those folks around that can help, and they have various specialties. A lot of the what I've seen from a lot of these CFO advisors is that they get together in groups and have various specialties within their group, and that can always be a good resource as well.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Phil Foster and Company. We're commercial real estate brokers. Lisa, you listed under energy, the fossil fuels and clean energy, solar, wind. It appears pretty obvious how the fossil fuels are doing. How do you think the clean energy industries are going to fare in the next couple of 3 years?
That's a good question. Clean tech has been really resilient through the last recession, and that was one that really carried a lot of the clusters in terms of total employment growth. But we have seen a slowdown a little bit just with what has gone on. Many of the wind producers, including Vestas, they were really nervous about the most recent renewal of the tax credit, so they did cut back significantly. So until many of those issues will be resolved at the federal level in terms of the tax credits for those industries, particularly clean tech, it's going to be a little challenging going forward. We see a slight slowdown, but it's still growing, and we expect that to continue in the next couple of years.
Hi, good morning. I'm Victor Bonilla. I'm the owner of American Motors. We're on the corridor of 69th and Highway 85, where y'all just opened up a new 7-Eleven. Thank you. Right across the street where the old high school was, there's just a vast amount of property there, and I'm just wondering what your future intentions are with that property. We've heard numerous discussions about, different things, and just wondering where you all are at on that.
Let me have Walt answer that question.
There are some plans in the making right now, but I'm not able to share that information. But to answer a previous question earlier, what type of activity is occurring in Commerce City? And I always like to give the analogy, our telephones are ringing. Prior to 2008, I used to walk into the office, pick up my telephone just to see if there was this dial tone. Now, I do not have no fear that the telephone is working. We are receiving calls, we are receiving inquiries, and investments are being made. So please look for this inside our city newsletter, as well as our newsletter for the Economic Development Division. If you're not signed up, please sign up at the registration table, and you will be given announcements about future developments that are occurring. There are a lot of things that are happening. Unfortunately, we're not at liberty to share that at this point in time.
Thanks, Walt. Any other questions? Let me ask you, how many of you are in a hiring mode today? Okay. Great. Well, thank you very much for coming this morning. Let me just say a bit about Commerce City and my closing remarks. I've worked with a lot of communities in the Front Range and in the metropolitan area, but there is none that compares to Commerce City and its interaction with its business community and its forward thinking. You are really fortunate to live and work here. And I think while I certainly know the city government has this in the forefront of their thoughts, it would be very good if all of you would take the time to contact officials like Walt and Julie and Jim Hayes and others who are in the staff, as well as Renee and the mayor and the members of the city council. It's vital to the health and the future of the community to become involved. And I'm not just saying be involved in a proactive way, but let them know what your concerns are. Moreover, what your thoughts would be, say, on what properties such as the former dog track and the school. I think that's how we all grow. But thank you very much for coming this morning. Thank you very much, panelists, for your great remarks, and we look forward to seeing you at the second Economic Forecast Council next year. Thank you. One more thing, on each of your tables, there's a little Life of Spring and these beautiful flowers that the city has provided. We'd like to have one person from each table take those home or back to your offices. You can kind of decide amongst yourselves we had some suggestions on how to do this, but I'm sure that someone can figure it out as to who would be the beneficiary of the beautiful flowers. Thank you again.
She was talking about how the Traverse was just so long.
Yeah,
She was just
right,
like, I
right.
felt like I wasn't even getting where they encountered bad weather.
Oh,
And
yeah,
as soon as
that'll
that
do
happens,
it.
you got to turn
That'll
around.
do it, yeah, absolutely.
Have you done that one?
When I was 18.
Oh, yeah.
It's been a while.
Thank you so much. It was nice to meet you. Yeah.